And just like that. Oh, nope.
What's up, Next Gen fam? That is so. Dylan was so excited to get in the live during the countdown. He's like, could not even wait for himself. Guys, we're I need it.
I'm almost positive my voice went through there too. So you had an orated countdown, 10, 9, 8, like the space launch, the rocket launched. It happened today.
We are so pumped. We are so pumped for this. This is going to sound crazy, but a bee just bit me on my finger and is down here. I cannot even begin to describe this. I may hop out of this show. Before we get started, huge shout out to everybody who's tuning in, who's watching. Shout out Grandma Rose. I see you. Thank you for tuning in and for being here. This is incredible. So exciting. We have the most incredible guest. So I'm going to dip out of this show. I got to go handle this bee that just stung me. Dylan's going to keep rocking and rolling. Nadia is an absolute beast. I cannot wait to bring her on.
You can't make this up. One shout out, one bio, Nadia coming on board. Joey Ledwin, really quickly, Hendrick Hudson High School, classmate of mine, interned with Nadia, made this all possible. We are stoked. Thank you, Joey. But enough of this. Justin, kill that bee, because we got an important discussion coming up. Nadia Masri is a 4-time founder. She is the co-founder and CEO of Perksy. She is redefining what market research truly means. Yes, you might need some research to know that this is the best mustache of all time, but Nadia is your go-to for all things learnings, insights. She's working with some incredible brands. She's building every day. She is such an insightful individual, and we can't wait to get her on. So let's do it. Paige, Houston, please bring Nadia in.
Hey, how's it going?
Nadia, how you doing today? How's your Thursday afternoon going?
Good. It is going very, very well. One thing that confuses me, though, is how you can be that chill about a bee just like being there and stinging you. Like, he's like, a bee just like stung me or bit me or something like that. There's no way that happened, because I feel like he'd be yelling. No, how do you just be like, oh, there's a bee, I guess I'll just go off video and like deal with the bee? Like, I would be out of here, even
That's
live.
Commitment.
I would run out of the building as fast as I could and be like, see you guys. Like, I'm
not even sure he's gonna come back. I think he's gone. But anything for the views, right? Anything to get the views up. Justin's taking one for the team. He has no finger apparently, but we send him our best. I hope he joins us soon. But until then, I'm gonna have a blast with you. How you been? How's your week going? We just talked about emailing. Give us the scoop. Where are you coming from?
Good. It's been a really busy week. We're doing all sorts of things. We got a ton of initiatives in play. I mean, it's crazy. Like, it's, for any aspiring founders out there, like, this is what you have to look forward to. It's just it never slows down. It never slows down. Like, every day is a crazy adventure. Sometimes that adventure is like, like Indiana Jones, the cool part of the adventure. And sometimes it's like Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom, being like Udam Shiba, with like your heart being like, oh, like, it's, some days it's crazy. But it's going well. It's going well.
I love that.
The team is definitely adjusting to COVID and like being remote. I mean, we like spending time with one another. So it kind of sucks. Like, that aspect sucks, not being able to hang out with your startup fam. But outside of that, I mean, we're definitely growing as a business. I think there's a really great opportunity for innovators and inventors during this time, especially those who are doing so in a digital capacity, just because I think brands are really starting to understand the need, or it's becoming more urgent, the need for speed. That's embarrassing, it rhymes. But the need for speed and the agility and, the need to be to have digital first solutions. And so that's definitely been an interesting thing. So I feel like I'm in a movie sometimes with this whole COVID stuff, It just feels like we're all in like this, I don't know, maybe we're all Sims.
Well, whoever is controlling the scenes, I think I
understand.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, if it's Paige who's pulling the strings, then I thank her, because we're blessed to be here today with you. We got a lot to dive into. I want to get back to where we're going next and how everything is operating for Perksy, where you're going in the future. But before we get there, I want to go back to 16-year-old Nadia, because you have done so much in like what seems as if 4 lifetimes, probably. But talk to me about what you were like for all of our audience members who are coming to us with their first business venture underway. So what was yours? What was that story like?
So believe it or not, my first business venture wasn't actually the one that's like listed on my LinkedIn or in my bio. My first business venture was a gift basket business that I started when I was like, I think I was like 14, 15. I don't know. I think I was in grade like 9 or 10 or something. And I discovered, there wasn't a mobile edition then, but I discovered DHgate, and which is now like, you know, I think a lot of people know about it. But at the time I was just like, wow, you can buy, I'm pretty sure it was DHgate at that time, but I was like, wow, you can buy all of these goods from China and like they're really cheap. And so I wanted to start a business, and I was like, you know what? Gift baskets, because that's what 2000s Nadia thought was cool. And I registered my first business. I was so excited. I got like a sheet of paper that said like Nadia Masri Enterprises, because that's like the first thing that comes to your head when you're like, my first business, it is my name. I'm going to throw in a dope word after. Yeah. And kind of something out of like Starling City. But that was my very first business. But the first real business, I think that kind of, was like me dipping my toe in the idea of entrepreneurship. My first real business I started when I was 17. I bought a franchise, a College Pro Painters franchise. So there was this really great opportunity. I'm pretty sure it still exists, and I would highly recommend that students go and check it out. But it's the College Pro Painters franchise, and it enables students to actually start a business. Like you have to properly take out a loan, like put up the money, buy the business, buy all the supplies. They actually take you through a lot of training beforehand. So in the school year, for the second half of the school year leading up to the summer, so this was my first year of college, I was going through all their training sessions. So they teach you about things like business operations and payroll and HR. And like my biggest recommendation to budding entrepreneurs is to learn that. Because if you have the innate like drive to be an entrepreneur, I mean, you've already got that. But the hardest things to figure out are like the really subtle, small things. You're like, how do you think about workers' safety insurance? Or like what is a vendor list? How do I get on one? What does that process look like? It's understanding those things is incredibly valuable. And I feel like I got a lot of that, less the vendor list, but I got a lot of that through the College Pro Painters experience. And that summer, I hired a bunch of student painters. We produced about $70,000 worth of work. I was like, oh my God, I don't have to work for 10 years, because at that time that seemed like a lot of money. And was like, this is great. And yeah, that was my first business.
At 17 years old, you were talking about workers' comp and I'm going to hire all my friends to come on board, and I'm taking out a bank loan, right? Talk to us about that bank loan, because I think there's a fun story behind that, how you actually got that one.
Yeah. So because I was 17, I actually wasn't old enough to take out my own loan. And like, I don't even think I had a credit card at that time. And so my dad, I begged my dad to be the guarantor on the loan. So basically, like, you can take out a loan if you have a guarantor, just someone who's like, look, if the loan defaults, I'll be responsible for it, whatever. And I came to my dad and my mom was like, don't do it. This is a terrible idea. It's $20,000. Don't do it. And my dad's like, okay, I think I'm going to do it. And so thank God for Papa Masri, who was a guarantor on the loan. And then I took that and ran with it.
I love that. Shout out to my own mother, who's probably listening, has helped me in many a way, from finances to the advice, and dad and everybody in the family. I hope Pops is listening, and we thank him one more time a few years later. So you get this business off the ground. You are really doing for the first time. You've learned a bit. You've taken that one-on-one course, if you will. What happens next? You go to college. You have a great first year in Canada where you're studying. Shout out to the Six. I know you're a big Drake fan. What inspires you to keep going in that journey?
So, I think it was like after that first year of college. So the way College Pro works is at the end of the summer, they have like a baby M&A process. So you have to sell the business to a different student. So you have to go through the experience of like what it's like to have an acquisition. It's obviously very baby. It's nothing compared to the real thing. But they're just trying to like mimic what it would be like. So just to be clear, like that business does shut down. If you decide that you want to do it again the year after, you can. But for me, I was just like, no, like, time to give it to the next student. And then after that, I actually had a relatively popular fashion blog, like locally popular, not like today's way of saying popular, which was like everyone on Instagram. Like there was no Instagram at this point. And I loved fashion. Like I'm like, you know, Helmut Lang. I'm like, I love fashion. I love style. And so I had the blog and I started getting invited to like New York Fashion Week, which like, you know, for, you know, just a hometown kid from Toronto was a pretty big deal. So I was one of the youngest Canadian fashion editors to be invited to New York Fashion Week. And I remember going to my business prof and telling her, so like the way that our courses were set up is if you missed, they were like really strict. If you missed 3 business labs, you'd be kicked out of the program. And I had already missed 1 that semester because I was sick, I had the flu. And then I knew that if I went to Fashion Week for like a week and a half, that I would miss 2 more labs. So yeah, exactly. And so
not great.
I shout out to Professor Leanne Haggerty. I got to track down her email somehow. Like I have to properly thank her, but she gave me like the best advice. She was really kind and she was like, look, this sounds like a really great opportunity. Why don't you do your labs? I'm doing some like makeup sessions with other folks that are going to be missing. You can come sit in on those and catch up with me directly. And I was like, great, sounds awesome. And so after I got back from New York Fashion Week, I'd been presented with some opportunities there. So some folks were like, why don't you just make this magazine or something? Like, why don't you build a business of this? And I was like, that's a good idea. I mean, that sounds cool. Like I know a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. Maybe I'd like to know a tiny, tiny bit more. And so I did decide to turn that into a company, but not before speaking to my business prof and being sure. And she was like, you know, Nadia, I'm not telling you which direction to go in, but I will say that like the walls of this building are always going to be here. Like academic institutions are always going to be here. You can come back whenever you want. But opportunities are fleeting. And if you have a good one, if you have an actual opportunity that's presented to you, you know, it's worth looking into. And so she said it in a kind of like sideways way. It's like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying, stating the facts and
doors open.
Yeah, doors open and like, here are my thoughts. And it's like, it's up to you, not telling you to leave school, which is what I say to people too. Like sometimes I actually kind of do wish I finished school, but we could talk about that later. And so I decided to turn that into a magazine. It was called Birdcage Media Group. We published niche print content to start, and then the iPad came out. Everyone went digital. And so we were like, all right, let's try digital content. But I think we're best known for our events. That's something that we did really well. It was more like bringing the community together. So we had a lot of events. We had like a t-shirt line that a lot of folks wore. So it had like it drove like a little bit of hype it made like a small splash in the Toronto and New York fashion scenes at the time.
At 19.
Yeah. Yes, I just turned 19. So I think I had started it. Yeah, I just turned 19.
18, 19 years old, building a business in a city that you're not from, hiring a team. That's what a Next Gen Entrepreneur is all about. We shared, Justin and myself, our founding story on this show a few weeks back. And I had a very similar experience with my college professor. Shout out to Professor Fullingcamp, who told me, Dylan, go to that event, go chase the opportunity. I'll move all the waiting from the midterm to your final exam. Didn't work out as well as I maybe hoped, but we got to be there. Totally. And these little things, right? I think you actually talked about it, and they add up, right? It's one person gives you the bank loan, and this professor says, I'll let you make up the labs. And Steve Jobs maybe kills your business with the iPad, but that allows you to get on to the next one. And so here you are, you're in New York now, and you close down the magazine perhaps after trying for a few years. It's working, you're building a brand, learning. What's next? Where do you go next? You're kind of in this like middle ground, right?
Yeah. So at that point, I was sort of in the in-between, but like, you know, I think back then I was a very different type of entrepreneur. I think when you're young, especially if you're young, smart and hungry, I think you have this like innate desire to prove yourself, especially when people around you are like, you're too young to be doing this. Like I think today people are much more celebratory of young entrepreneurship, but there's still going to be naysayers. There's still going to be people who are like, you're young. What do you know? I've been in business for so long. And so, you know, I think my family at first, it wasn't that they weren't supportive. I think they were trying to make sure that I was making the right decisions for myself. And so, you know, I think I had such a need to prove myself that I was I was a very different entrepreneur. Like I didn't ask for help when I needed it because I was afraid that it would show that I didn't know what I was doing, which, like, to be clear, at that age, you don't. And the only way to know what to do is to ask for help from people around you. And like today, I ask for help from anyone. I have absolutely no shame about anything. I'm like, yes, I don't know what that means. I had one advisor who's now actually one of my really good buddies. He also is the founder of a tech company. And he was like, Nadia, the power of I don't know is so impactful, because if you act like or say that you know, people can fault you for that, for the result of it. But if you say, I don't know, no one can fault you for that. No one, it's not your fault that you don't know.
Right.
So
I love that.
I think after I shut down Birdcage, I was heartbroken. I was so heartbroken. I was like, oh, this, like, I'm a terrible entrepreneur. Like, what have I done? Because I didn't really understand the big picture yet. I didn't understand that, like, failure is a stepping stone to success. And there is you can have no feedback without failure. You need to get that feedback loop to understand what to do next time, how to grow, how to build. And so I think the thing that Birdcage taught me most was how to fail forward. I don't think everyone would characterize it as a failure. I don't even know that I would, but I think if the outcome is, it depends how you measure success, but if the outcome is like grow to be $1 billion company, then it was a failure. But in many other ways, it definitely was a success. So after that, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And someone from my community in Toronto reached out, great guy. He was the founder of a company called 460. He asked if I wanted to join a CMO. And I joined as CMO and then helped to rebrand the product and became co-founder and CMO of the new product. And so 460 was a digital marketing platform for e-commerce retailers. It was very cool. It now embeds into a lot of Shopify stores. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think that was my first foray into more of the tech side of things. Like I really learned about digital platforms and like emerging platforms and new technologies. That's kind of where I went to TechCrunch for the first time, like TechCrunch Disrupt. I went to Web Summit for the first time. So that was really the time period where I really got a taste of what it means to be not just an entrepreneur, but a tech entrepreneur. And so after about 1.5 years, I actually decided to move back to New York. So I wanted to go back to New York and I wanted to go back to school. And so I had a small exit from the business, which was cool. It was the first time I've been able to do that. So I have a little bit of cash on hand. And I moved back to New York, and I was taking classes through the Harvard Extension School, actually. And then I discovered that, I think it was in 2012 or something, and I think like all young people should take note of this, that this is an option. This is a thing that you can do. I just believe like you should have no pride about how you go about doing things. You should ruthlessly focus on the outcome of what you want, which is if you want education, you want to build a business, focus on that, not how you go about doing it. So I started out through the Harvard Extension School, discovered that they had a full-time degree program. So you actually apply to it after you've taken, I think it's 2 or 3 courses through just their Harvard Extension School, and then you flag yourself to apply. Like you put those credits towards like, I want to apply for a full-time degree program. You write an essay, you do all these things, a placement test, all that stuff. So I got into that program and I started full-time on campus towards the end of 2014. And so that was me going back to school. And it's so interesting because I was 23 and I was like, I think I was more ready to learn. Like I was like, okay, I've run 2 businesses now. And now I know what my gaps are. I know what my knowledge gaps are. Like the best thing that you can do for yourself in life is figure out what you don't know. Because once you know what you don't know, you can start figuring out how to know it. And so I was like, all right, well, I'd love to learn about legal. I want to know about contract law. I'm in the US and I'm Canadian, so it's helpful for me in general just to understand American law. I've always been interested in behavioral science. And so I was taking psychology, I was studying emotions, epigenetics, and I was doing all the things that really interested me. And it was a very unique experience. It was a really unique experience, Dylan. I just think everyone should take note that option exists, that there are alternative ways for you to get the education that you need, and to be able to support your goals in life. Like we are the next generation. We get to decide how we want to do things. Like who's to say that I need to do the standard 4-year degree, apply at the exact age that they want me to apply and like do all those things. I mean, I did it the first time, but I was like, I was doing like a triple major and a minor. I was like trying to overstretch myself because but the reason I did that is because I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I was trying to pick a bunch of stuff. And like, I was on councils. I was in a sorority. Canadian sororities are very different, by the way. We're mostly just like volunteers for the community.
Slightly different.
It was slightly different. I learned a lot about the differences when I came to the US, and I was like, oh, interesting. I did all of those things, but I think all of those kinds of programs are great. Anything that has to do with being a part of a community, I think is important. And it was just like, once I realized, I think I'd been so focused on trying to go through doors and find where the doors are in life and go through them. And I should have just realized earlier on that like you can walk through the walls.
Right. I love that. Nadia, so much to pull out there. Going back to the beginning.
Yes, sorry for rambling. It's like once I get started, it's like
this is great. It's a meaningful journey. And what's most impactful, you learn from each experience and you let that influence your path, right? You were so self-aware from a young age. It's clear. You realize, okay, I want to go back to school. Let me find the option for me. I'm not going to apply to the traditional programs. Oh, this exists. Let me go down that path. And to your point, I was not aware of that prior to your story. And this is even 6-7 years later, perhaps, than you were applying. And so there's always a resource, Lambda School, right? A community like maybe a Next Gen where you can start to ask the right questions. But I want to go back to what we'll call that pseudo failure, if you will, with Birdcage. Something that a lot of entrepreneurs in Next Gen, I struggled this myself. We tie our personal worth to our companies. And so shutting the doors on a business, that hits home, right? That hurts deep. Everyone we think sees us as a failure, right? I can't imagine going to mom and dad or my best friends and telling them if I ever had to shut down Next Gen HQ. Thank goodness it won't happen. We're working hard to make sure it's the case. But how'd you deal with that? How'd you separate Nadia from the business that was no longer going to move forward?
At that age, I didn't. Today I do, but at that age, I was not that far along in my personal development to understand the difference. I did not understand that business is business and the market is just like that's what happens. It's economics, it's business. Like these things take place and these things happen. You have new entrants to the market, they disrupt you, and then or they render you irrelevant. Or like, I think I just cut out. Am I back?
You're back. We got you.
So I don't think that I was able to separate at that age. It was extremely hard. I remember that time period. I was so young, and I feel like I'd been working so hard to be a particular type of entrepreneur. And I think a lot of it, I know this is going to sound super cheesy, but I think a lot of it had to do with inauthenticity. I don't think that I was I don't think I was comfortable enough. Because like when you're young, you're still figuring out who you are. I don't think that's like anything to say about young people. I mean, we've all been young. And I think we all remember that at that age, like I think it's like fine to accept that like, you're not done like shaping yourself. I still don't think I am, but especially at that age, like I don't think I really knew who I was and what I was trying to do and like what kind of person I wanted to be and what kind of entrepreneur I wanted to be for myself. So I think I was trying on other people's entrepreneurial personalities for size. I was like trying them on, see how they fit, and because I don't think I was really acting as myself, I saw as this failure that like me as an entrepreneur failed at doing this because of who I was. But I've since learned that that's not the case. And really, you have to learn how to separate. You have to learn how to separate. Like at that age too, I didn't know what pivoting was. Like I've since obviously learned those kinds of things, but tons of businesses pivot. Some of the most successful businesses have resulted from like a massive pivot where they did not do that at all in the beginning. And so I think about it from the perspective of like, if you can figure out who you are as an entrepreneur and do everything in the way that you want it done, then you are leading an authentic company. If something happens to that company, you have to be able to identify that there are many market forces at play that affect that. And look, sometimes it is because of things we do. Sometimes it is. Sometimes like things don't work because we have a particular way of doing things, or our idea didn't work the way we wanted it to, or we didn't apply it or execute the same way. But that's also fine. It doesn't mean that you're a bad entrepreneur. It means that that was not your particular project. And the way I think about it is, if I hadn't learned then what I did, I don't think I would have been able to scale this company and grow it in the way that I have, because I would not have had those learnings. And who knows what Perksy would have been.
It's so hard in the moment, Nadia, right? When you are shuttering the doors, you are firing the employee, telling the staff what's happening, laying them off if you have to go to that level. But in hindsight, we view that as a learning. And we like to say at Next Gen HQ, it's a long game, right? We're playing this thing for 100 years. I want my grandchildren, if Justin recovers from this bee sting, which I'm happy to report he is okay, he's alive and recovering. But if he is able to come back, I want to be doing this thing until we're 90 years old, sitting in our rocking chairs, right? Across from each other in the nursing home. That's where we're going. And so, yeah, it might hurt today, right? It's tough to separate. But speaking to this next generation entrepreneurs who are in the moment right now, who are living and dying by their companies, I think your case study is a perfect example of there is another day, right? You close Birdcage, you go learn more at school, and then after a very turbulent time, which I do want to talk about, but what do you go from Harvard, right? You're in class, you are dealing with this illness, and happy to touch upon that if that is something we can go deeper into.
Let's get into it. Totally.
So I'll turn it over to you. Take it over, take back the mic. What's going on with Nadia? You're now in this full-time program, but what happens next?
So I go to a conference. I was just at a I think it was like a Tony Robbins conference. I've always been kind of like tight with their peeps. And so like I was having a great time. I was on stage with Tony dancing around, like it was a blast. But that many people means that, sometimes you can get exposed to certain things, any kind of virus, any kind of, even the common cold. And a week later, I feel like something like an anvil dropped on my head. I'm sitting in my apartment and it feels like something just crushed my brain. When the doctor asks you on a scale of 1 to 10, like when you're like, oh, I have a headache. And they're like, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your headache? And you're like, oh, I don't know, like a 6 or a 7. I now know how to answer that question, because it was like a 100 out of 10. It was like I was screaming and writhing, and I was like, my dad's a doctor. I get on the phone. I'm like, Dad, something's wrong. Like I cannot explain the pain I'm in, and it had subsided a bit. Stop. And I'm like, he's like, get on a plane. Doesn't matter how much it costs. Like, I know it's last minute. Try to find a flight in like 2 hours, whatever it is. Get back here, because we're Canadian, and as a result, we have free healthcare. And I wasn't sure what my Harvard plan covered. And my dad's like, we don't have time to figure that out. Like, we can't call them. Like, if something's wrong, you need to get home now. And it's only an hour flight, right? So he's like, get home, we'll figure it out. He picks me up, we drive straight to the hospital. And while I'm there, they're trying to figure out what's wrong with me. And it happens again. And I'm like screaming in pain. And after we figured out that the Harvard healthcare was fine, I actually got transferred to Mass Gen, so Massachusetts General Hospital, amazing place. And they tell me that I have something called meningioencephalitis. So meningitis and encephalitis. Itis means inflammation of. Meninges are the membranes surrounding your brain. Encephala is your brain. So it means my brain was swelling and the meninges around my brain were swelling. And it was honestly sheer fluke, not contagious, not something that's genetic. What happens is like a virus or bacteria somehow by sheer fluke slips into your spinal fluid, happens 1 in 200,000 times, and infects your brain. It could have been the common cold. Yeah, it could have been the common cold. And my mom always said I'm, 1 in a million. So
there you go.
It knocked me out of the park for about 2 months, 2.5 months. I can't remember anything from that time period, basically. I was basically asleep I was only awake for 4 hours of every day. All I remember is like somehow someone came to like change my sheets and like things like that. And I was just incapacitated. But what was crazy was, and this is something like a recent revelation that I've had, which is probably a new addition to the story that you might have heard like, elsewhere. But so when I came out of it, it felt like my brain had been wiped clean. Any anxieties or stressors or anything that used to hold me back, I just couldn't remember it. So to start, I couldn't remember it. Like my memory eventually came back, but in the beginning, like I couldn't remember it. So like I went into recovery with a completely blank slate. And my mom was like, and what's really interesting is because I missed a bunch of classes, I had to make up one of those classes in the summer because it was cumulative. So it was a quantitative reasoning class, like a math class. And I couldn't just like weight everything on the final, which they let me write like later in June, after I recovered. So I had to make up one of the courses. I took a marketing management class. It was an HBS class adapted for undergraduate study. Highly recommended if anyone wants to sign up for it. It's through Harvard Summer School. And it was there that I learned about marketing, like truly learned about marketing and market research. And it's what led me to build Perksy. And my mom actually told me, she's like, I wonder if you would have been able to do it in the way that you did. Like I went all in. I've always believed in total immersion. Like I moved to San Francisco. I learned everything that I could about tech. My brain was just absorbing like a sponge. And my mom was like, I wonder if you would have been able to do that had you not experienced it. She's like, maybe that's what your path required. It required a blank slate so that you could totally throw yourself into this. And it made me start thinking like today, that makes me question, like I treat myself very differently now. I get 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. I eat well, I exercise, I try to be mindful of my state, because like your brain needs to be like clear and clean and healthy at all times, because it is the thing that enables you to do everything in life. It's like that brain sends signals, that brain comes up with ideas and thoughts, you have to take care of it. And I really started thinking differently about that. I haven't pulled an all-nighter since. Definitely been in college, but I haven't done that since. But it was definitely a very scary time. I mean, I even remember it was embarrassing once. My first investor meeting, because it took, even though I was like recovered by June, I still couldn't get back. There were some temporary residual effects. I couldn't get back my vocabulary. I was struggling. So like, let's say I wanted to say that something was magnificent. I'd be like, oh, and it was weird because like I knew what it was in my head, but the part of my brain that knew the word could not connect it to the part of my brain that was responsible for saying the word. And I got so embarrassed once in my first VC meeting because I was doing it and I was like, I can't say what I need to say. And it was so frustrating. But it was just one of those things that I had to overcome. And I mean, eventually my memory came back and my personality traits stabilized. What was crazy was during that time, a lot of people during recovery, I remember I was in that HBS class and there was a girl in my class who asked me if I was Asperger's. And I was like, A, you can't just ask people if they're Asperger's, for starters. And B, no, I'm not, but I've just gone through like, pretty traumatic, like brain experience, like a brain injury. And it was affecting my ability to speak to others. And I'm like super outgoing. And like, that's always been me. Like I very outgoing, I feel like very bubbly, very energetic, but I was just like, I couldn't get there. It's like my personality, and like the neurologist was like, yeah, your personality will be temporarily affected. And I developed this crazy interest in like physics and chemistry and like all of these things. And it was weird because I started grasping concepts that I couldn't grasp before, which is why I now believe, and I communicate this message to anyone who will listen, to all of the next gen entrepreneurs out there. Take it from someone who would not have said this before, experiencing a brain injury for herself and seeing that like all that stuff you see on the internet like could very well be real. That is, anything that you think you cannot do is a function of you thinking that you cannot do it. And that is literally what prevents you. That sounds super cheesy and very straightforward. It's like simple, but I'm telling you, the concepts I was able to grasp during that time, I had told myself I wasn't good at math. I ended up being top student. I was like, it was mind blowing. And like all of these things, I was like, holy crap, what if the only thing that has been holding me back was my limiting beliefs? And the fact that I don't have those limiting beliefs right now is the reason why I can do anything. I can learn anything. And that was transformational for me. It changed it. I know it sounds like, it kind of sounds, again,
changes the game.
Yeah, but it was changed my life. Yeah.
I love that. We had Kara Golden, the CEO and founder of Hint Water. You might be familiar with the brand earlier this month. She said something that I think you live by, you embody. She asked what if you didn't know the word fear? What if that word didn't exist in your vocabulary, right? How would you behave? How would you change your actions, your decisions? And I think maybe perhaps this was the case. You may not had that emotion taken away from you, but you added this drive and this ability to pursue. I can imagine we've all been in that investor pitch where we lose our word, and that's without having had the experience you went through. And of course, it is devastating, right? The nerves come in, you're trying to battle that, but you persevered, you pushed through. And so take us now ahead, Nadia. You launched Perksy. You are building this thing. You're passionate about it, but you got to work on the tech, the design. And here we are. What was that, 2017 you launched? 3 years later, you're on the cover of
2018.
2018. 2 years later, goodness. On the cover of Forbes, you are seemingly, from an outsider perspective, built this machine, this behemoth, 20 plus people on your team. But I can't imagine the early days were as glorious as they might seem today. And that early stage, you've been there now. This is your fourth time. But what were some of the bumps in the road, and how did you take those lessons and apply them to get even further this time around?
I think after the experience that I went through, it's interesting. I actually wanted to add to something you said. You said, what if you didn't know the word fear? There's actually research that has been done to show that some of the biggest risk takers have slightly underactive amygdala. So they don't respond to fear in the same ways. They did a brain scan on that. Have you seen Free Solo, the climber guy?
Yes, insane.
So they actually saw that he had an underactive amygdala. So he doesn't respond to fear and anxiety in the same way. And what's really interesting is after that, I think I didn't look at fear in the same way because I was like, I almost died. I woke up so many times during that process being like, I almost died. And to me, that's now the worst. Before, the worst thing was oh my God, the worst thing would be my business failing. And now it's the worst thing is dying, or that's all, that would be the worst. And so
different playing field.
It kind of put things into perspective. Yeah. And I think I was I just became really fearless from being what if it happens again? And what if I don't get a second chance? Am I going to sit here and be I don't want to be on a deathbed one day and say, I should have asked a person for that meeting. I should have asked that VC for a meeting. I should have talked to that brand. I should have done that. I didn't want to there's this joke that my mom used to say is if you keep saying should, you'll just should all over yourself. And it's saying should. And I was I don't want that. And so I think I definitely entered into Perksy a bit differently, being why can't I have the thing that I want to have? Why can't I do all these things? I would say the most difficult things for me were things that had to do with humans. I would say the most difficult experiences were really at first, any kind of rejection is always hard. So the first time you go around fundraising, what people don't realize, I think every entrepreneur should know this. If you want to be an entrepreneur, get used to having 99 no's and 1 yes. But you need to have 100 conversations. But this is normal. Do not think it's not normal. Every founder out there who's oh yeah, fundraising was easy, blah, blah, blah. No, it wasn't. Unless you're a 4-time founder and that fund already invested in you before. And they're just hey, I'm starting a new business. Can you invest again? They're yeah, we know you. We're comfortable. Yeah. I mean, otherwise, if you are a fresh founder seeking money for a new business, expect a lot of people will say no. And that's totally fine. That's the way it works. I think at first the rejection was definitely hard. But the most difficult things about running a business, I would say, are trying to match, trying to get everything up to speed. But those aren't emotionally challenging. Those are just intellectually challenging. So I'm going to separate this. Intellectually challenging is trying to get the things that you need. But I think those kinds of things come from hustle. What hustle cannot solve is figuring out when the right time is to let an employee go, and then dealing with the fact that you have to do it. Cutting a budget in a department because you need to spend less. Promoting someone above someone else and having to deal with, team dynamics. Those are the kinds of things that are more difficult, I think. Or, sometimes it's having to report bad news. Everyone loves reporting good news, but what about when you have to report bad news? That's the stuff that's hard. I find it very, very difficult, and I think people should. I don't think that we should pull from TV and movies when it comes to firing. If you have to let someone go, it's extremely difficult. Like it's really difficult and you never want to do it. And like having to get to the point where, you just have to rip off the Band-Aid, you have to do it, all these things. That emotionally is hard and you have to be ready to do that. You have to be ready to say no, and you have to be ready to disappoint a lot of people, because sometimes entrepreneurship, I read this quote somewhere, it's not my own. It's about, sometimes you see things that other people cannot see. So it's about working towards something that sometimes no one can see except for you, which means that you're going to get a lot of dissenters around you. You're going to get a lot of pushback. And it's like fighting against that. And then like there's the self where you sit there and you're like, am I making the right calls? Because if I'm not, this is all going to be my fault if it doesn't go well.
Right.
That is the hardest stuff to deal with a business. Like, sure, you gotta figure out how to make ends meet. Like, yeah, there are times where like there was one time in the early days before we received funding, I think it was like a week before we got our first check, we had like $3 in the bank account. Like literally $3 in the bank account. That's happened like 4 times. Like it happened a lot. And like, you gotta be okay with it. You gotta be okay with it. You gotta have the intestinal fortitude for that to happen. And you're just like, it's gonna happen. I remember like my one of my teammates, I went to him and I was like, Andrew, we need a 30K by the end of the week. And he's like, okay, do we not have that? I'm like, no, we have about $3. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, what do you mean end of the week? It's Wednesday. You mean by Friday? I was like, yeah. And he's like, what are you gonna do? I was like, I guess I gotta go raise some money. And so luckily, like we figured some things out. We already had some conversations in play, and this was back in the angel stage, right? But those are the tough things to deal with, I would say.
Entrepreneurs, we are able to just stomach a bit more risk than I'd say the average person. And that's not a good thing or bad thing. It's just how it is. Right? We're not blessed or skilled because of that. We just can deal with it and perhaps go a little bit longer. So you being there on Wednesday saying, okay, I got 48 hours roughly. I got to get $30,000. All right, cool. Let me act. Right? Let me do something.
Yeah.
How do you get that experience though, Nadia? Because you didn't even have a co-founder doing it with you from the beginning, from day one. You had an early team for sure, and I have no doubt they were impactful. But you're by yourself, right? You are recovering still from this very much so traumatic event. What tools or resources or even conversations would you, thinking back, recommend to somebody who is preparing to launch their first company?
Mentors. Okay, so while I was chill in the moment, about an hour later, I called one of my mentors freaking out. Okay, I was freaking out. I was like, I'm gonna do this. And he goes to me, he goes, so what's gonna happen if you don't pay that bill? I was like, well, what do you mean what's gonna happen? Like, I have to pay the bill. And he goes, do you? And I was like, yeah. Yeah, right? Yeah, like I have to. And he's like, is your whole business gonna collapse? I was like, well, no, and he goes, oh, okay, well, is everyone on your team gonna leave you? I was like, well, I mean, no. And he's like, oh, are you gonna lose all your customers? Is your product gonna suddenly disappear? And I was like, no. And he goes, oh, okay. See, those are real problems. Call me when you have real problems.
Wow.
And I was like, I was so taken aback. And look, it was tough love, but I was so taken aback that I was like, maybe he's right. And one of the things we actually did was we called up we called the person that we had to pay the bill to, and we were like, we can't pay this. And they're like, okay, when can you? And I was like, I mean, in 2 months. And they're like, okay, give us a date. And I was like, okay, we'll pay this in November. And like, I just learned these things, but I'm very big on mentors. This sounds like really lame, but I consider most people my mentors. Like, I think there's something you can learn from absolutely everyone, and you should be hungry to try and collect that information and try to surround yourself with people who could give you good advice. But the master skill you need to learn is how to interpret the device or the advice. Meaning that like lots of different people will tell you different things. You'll have lots of people whispering in your ear. You have to learn whose advice to take and in which category and at what time. That's not something I learned right away. And if I could tell anyone to learn that skill now to save myself some heartache, I would definitely say learn that skill. It's just like, don't take marketing advice from someone who was strong in their company. Maybe they were a CEO, but they were a product-based CEO, right? They're really strong in product. I mean, listen to it, but seek the experts that align with what you're trying to create, and folks that you're like, I would want that person to be my CMO. So look at them and be like, would I want 100 people like that person in my company? If so, then I'm willing to take their advice. That's a way that I think about it. So I really just learned from like, yeah, in the beginning, I read a lot of books. I don't know how much I would celebrate that method right now. Like, I definitely think that it's good to do, and I do still do it. But the best advice I get is like books are, it's like a moment in time that was immortalized. It's like this thing that worked in a moment in time for a particular person, and it's immortalized. And like you read it 5 years later, and you're like, okay, is that really going to work? Like if we're saying that we're the next generation, isn't the whole concept we have to do what's next? And so I try to find people who can give me in the now advice that specifically pertains to my business. That's what I care about most, I think.
I love that, Nadia. It's a lot of it boils down to, I believe it's Teddy Roosevelt's "man in the arena" quote, right? Brene Brown talks about it. You have to seek out the people who you should be listening to. An analogy we love at NextGen HQ, the hand in the sand mentality. Scoop up as much of the advice as you can. Books, mentor conversations, this live. Pick it all up in your hands, and then let the vast majority of it that doesn't apply to you drop through. But what sticks, those few grains of sand, those are the nuggets that you have to run with. And that's what will impact you and your business moving forward.
Yeah. And one of the things I want to say is Alyssa Canning here wrote a note saying extending deadlines is so often okay as long as you're updating stakeholders and communicating clearly. I agree with that. And that brings me to another point, which is learn how to be like very transparent, because things are always okay. Things typically work out fine when you tell the truth and you're just honest and you're just like even with investors, like you want to tell them all the good stuff always. Learning how to bring the bad stuff and be like, this is happening. It sets this precedent where it's like, thank you for telling us because we can help you solve it. But also like, we're not going to be surprised. It's like, it's hard to do. It's so hard to do, especially like, imagine you told someone, you know, we're going to have X product built by Friday, and tomorrow's Friday and it's the morning. And I'm like, oh crap, not going to happen. You know, people are going to be like, if I knew on Monday that we weren't going to get there by Friday, Monday would have been the time to tell everyone it's not going to be ready by Friday. Not waiting until it's finished and it's already not done, and everyone shows up being like, hey, is it done? And you're like, oh, well, here's the thing, it's not. As soon as you have the information, deliver it, because then you will set a precedent. People will learn to trust you. You will set a precedent of being someone who is transparent. You'll have no boys and girls who cried wolf. People will learn to trust you. And so like, I like what Alyssa said, because that makes a huge difference. And she said it took her a long time to learn. It took me a long time to learn as well. It really did. It's a hard thing because people don't teach you that. I don't think society teaches us that. Instagram doesn't teach us that. Like, we're not really taught to bring the bad. We're taught to showcase the good. And like, even when we're kids, we want to hide our report cards and be like, I got an A in English. And your parents are like, what did you get in science and math? And what did you get in gym class and music? So
that's not important.
But providing all the information. So like, tell the truth and tell the real truth, not a half truth, the whole truth. And I think it makes a big difference, and your team will respect you and they'll stay by you. Very important for team building.
That's amazing, Nadia. Alyssa's so inspiring, and everybody who is listening, enacting these changes, learning from Nadia and her failures, wins, everything. It's all part of experiencing and influencing your journey forward. But Nadia, we are sadly coming to the end of our time together, but I want to end on a looking forward note. We could do this all day, truly, and I hope we will get to have you back on the Next Gen stage, digital or in person, to be determined next. But you are someone that the next generation of entrepreneurs we look up to, right? We see you, of course, winning the accolades, but more than that, you are doing it the right way. You are solving problems. You are adding value. You are creating experiences for people on both sides, brands and consumers. What is something that you are most excited by when it comes to this innovation, the next generation of thinking, whether that's at Perksy or something in general that you see as a trend and you can't wait to watch unveil itself in the future?
So, okay, I'll start with what I want to see in the world first. My dream is that someone will create a way for me to, like, I love augmented reality. I love augmented reality. Not like Pokemon Go style, but more like immersive augmented reality. So there's this company called Meta, and they make these amazing glasses. And I tried them on once, and it was so cool. In front of me, I could see objects, I could move them, I could manipulate them just by wearing these clear glasses. It was mind-blowing. And my dream is just to be able to control things with my voice and with my hands. And like, I want to be able to answer emails by being like, I want to look at my inbox and be like, all right, there's an email from Dylan here. He wants me to join this talk. Okay, can you reply like, yes, Dylan, I would love to do that. And like, I can swipe it away, scroll to the next one. Imagine if you had like a board in front of you with your vision.
Yeah.
You could draw with your fingers and you can create these like maps of what things look like. And I was like, okay, so the product is going to look like this. It's going to be a square. And then over here, we're going to have this. Imagine just drawing with your fingers. So that is what I'm most excited for. So I like following sort of what's happening in the AR space. That really excites me. And the voice space, I think I'm pretty, I think we're very far away, but I'd like to see us be further along with voice. And I think it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs who are like, I want to be in tech. I'd love to start a company. You want to solve problems? Dig into voice. Lots of investors are bullish on it right now. It's a big space. And then what I'm excited about in terms of us and our business, I mean, I'm definitely really excited that brands are really interested in agility and speed and adopting digital first platforms right now. One of the major problems we're trying to solve on our app side is that, so in our app, you can answer questions, collect points, and then redeem for rewards. The thing is that, you know, sometimes brands aren't always targeting like certain types of individuals, and we have so many users that it's hard to give them all questions and content. And so if I had an ask, I would say like, I'm happy to put out my email here for people to reach out to me. I want to talk to entrepreneurs. I want to talk to the next generation of entrepreneurs. I want to know how you guys would solve this problem, how you would think about it. I love the concept of co-creation. And so like, if this were your app and you had to solve the problem of being like, how do we create more content in the app that can reward people, but always a business problem? And this is one of the things you learn when you're an innovator, that you might be able to solve a problem from an innovative standpoint, but what about the commercial initiative? Meaning that we could just ask more questions in our platform ourselves, but that would cost us money. So how do we do it in a way that it doesn't break the bank? Is there a different type of reward that we can create? Can we do it through targeted brand partnerships? Like, how can we rebuild a reward model for the future and just like create like new and innovative ways that younger audiences want to give feedback to brands? And how can we do it through our existing platform? So I'm happy to so my email address is my first name and my last name. So you can see it here. It says Nadia Masri. So it's first name, last name at getperksy.com. Don't put the S before the R. So it's Perksy. So it's like PERKSY. Getperksy.com. And I would love it.
Put that in the comments.
Put it in the comments. But I would love to talk to different folks and just get your perspective, because it's a really interesting problem to solve. And like, once we solve it, we'll really be able to grow even more as a business. And, you know, having like brilliant minds involved in that, I would say that would be game changing. And I'm happy to also do some swapsies. You know, I'll talk about you. We can talk about your business. We talk about my business. You ask me any questions you want, give some pointers, stuff like that.
Love that.
If anyone has questions about fundraising too, that's always a tough one. So, yeah.
Nadia, I'm going to be taking you up on that. So I'm going to be back in your inbox very, very soon with more questions. But you're going to get a few hundred, I'm sure, at least, if not thousands and tens of thousands of next geners who are going to get the best internship experience working with you digitally. But who knows what the future holds. Nadia, you are a tremendous joy. Your energy is contagious. We appreciate you giving us your time today. You gave your email, but where can folks learn more about you, Perksy, and Instagram, Twitter? Where can they find more?
So you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. So my handle is at Nadia then Gen, as in next gen. It's short for my middle name, which is Genevieve. So technically, does that mean that my name is like the next gen? It's like Nadia
There
next
you go.
gen is like Genevieve. So Nadia Gen Masri. That's my handle. So you can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm more likely to reply on. Actually, no, both. I guess both.
There you go. The DMs are open. It sounds like. Go follow
DMs
Nadia.
are open.
Nadia, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us on Next Gen Live. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thanks so much for having me.
We appreciate you. Take care. Woo! That is some excitement. I can't even begin to start. Nadia has built such an impactful business, and she's still on the journey. We're going to have to do remember when she was there in like 2 or 3 years from now, when we get her back on and we see just how far Perksy has come even further into the future. Some of the highlights for me personally, she has found a way to dive in 1,000,000,000% to her business, but also remain steadfast and confident in being an individual. And she knows who Nadia is. And despite all of the various ups and downs and traumatic health experiences, she has added that to the toolkit. Right? Those are learnings. Those are pieces of her journey that will influence the next stages. And she embodies everything that we're about at Next Gen HQ, never stopping learning, making relationships number one, and thinking about the long game. And so, team, with that, one quick health update from my good buddy and my partner, Justin. We are receiving word from the doctors that he is A-OK. He'll be back in action with us next week. We come at you live here on Next Gen HQ. But until then, we want to connect with you further. So join our Roundup newsletter. We'll be in your inbox Monday evenings. Head to nextgenhq.com/getmomentum. We'll put that in the comments right now. Drop your email in there. You will get all of the tools and resources you need to win at business and life. Who doesn't want that? Sign me up. I'm subscribed with actually 13 email addresses. I want so much, I make new email addresses to get in there. But enough said, enough from me. Get on the Roundup. Go digest everything, Nadia, the brain dump that we shared with you today. And we appreciate you. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the afternoon. Dylan G from Next Gen HQ signing out.